gentlemen, to another edition of the Junkyard Dawgcast. It is a Stay Wolk UGA recruiting show edition. I am your host, Benjamin Wolk. As always, here with Jordan Hill. We've got a lot of things to cover. It's, as you can see, for those that are watching on YouTube, you can see, or Twitter or Facebook Live, like you can see in the background, I'm in a hotel room right now, which means that I'm on the road, which means it's spring practice season, and there's a lot of high school football practices going on. But there, maybe more importantly than that, there's a lot of big decisions that are coming up. Georgia coaches like me, they're also out on the road. We have an awesome interview with Army transfer Elo Modozie that I think everyone is really going to enjoy. So a lot to get into in this episode. We'll do predict to commit, of course. We'll have some new predictions there as well. But Jordan, what do you think? What do you think of this time of year?
It's great. It's sort of funny, and we talked about this, I think, on the last Stay Wolk, how we're getting to the point in the year where recruiting is the main thing to talk about, and that's what makes doing this podcast so fun. I did want to ask you, you're out on the road a lot more. You've been bouncing around all these different high schools. Make sure if you're not following along on Dogs 24/7, Ben has done a great job of posting notes from these different high schools, sort of what he's learning. But when you're out at these different schools, what's sort of the meal situation? Are you hitting up fast food? Do you have go-to fast food places? Are you getting recommendations of local places? What's sort of your play when you're on the road a lot more this time of year?
So this is a loaded question, Jordan, because I was trying to get fit. I was trying to get my health right. I had gotten a gym membership. I was trying to get into a routine, and then these 3 weeks come up, and it's really hard for me with the travel. I've been doing a lot of 6 a.m. practices, 6 p.m. practices, driving around a lot. It's hard for me to get my job done and also, do the health thing the way that I want to. So yesterday was probably a little bit of a relapse from a meal standpoint. I hit a couple fast food places. I will say I'm going down to South Georgia in the back half of the week. And I know there's always some little hole in the wall, nice spots that you got. So I typically ask the football coaches, like, hey, what are the hole in the wall spots nearby that I should definitely check out? So I got some good recommendations from a couple of South Georgia coaches for later in the week, whether that be Thursday night, maybe Friday afternoon. But I am looking forward to those based on some of the recommendations that I got. Great question, but just a little bit too close to home.
Yeah, I feel like I would not do a very good job of seeking out new stuff. And honestly, like, shout out all the recruiting guys. Like, if you're staying fit, you're putting in a lot of effort, because it's nonstop.
I mean, I will give a no free ads, but I did get the Planet Fitness membership just because they have them all over the place. And so it's like I can be on the road and hop into a Planet Fitness, but they're also having the membership doesn't get you in the gym. You also have to have the mental strength and capacity and willpower to do it. And that's where I'm lacking a little bit. All right. Well, I feel like it's impossible to do one of these shows without starting talking about 5-star quarterback Jared Curtis. I'll just full disclosure, Jordan and I are recording this on Wednesday morning. So this is April 30th. This is actually the day that Georgia offensive coordinator Mike Bobo will be in home for the first time with Jared Curtis. He's going to be up in Nashville. I don't know what all exactly he's going to get into, but I know that he's going to, go in home with the family, spend some time with them, probably eat some dinner with them. He's probably going to try and get up to the school at some point during the day as well. Like, he's going to try and make this an all-day affair. And the reason why is because we're, 5, 6, I guess when you're listening to this, 4 days away from Jared Curtis making what we believe will be his final decision. And, we've said, I think we've covered plenty what the decision is. It's Georgia or it's Oregon. He will be making that decision on May 5th. And really at this point, I think it comes down to conversations that Jared needs to have with his family and his representatives and his agency to figure out what's the right spot for him. This is more a question that I have, not an answer. How much do in-home visits matter now? Like back in the day, these in-home visits are where you would lock these guys down. They would have that emotional feeling the day or two before they make their decision. It's like, coach came in and I just felt right with him. It's possible. We live in this world where everyone thinks money is the only deciding factor and it's all that matters. And I'm not going to sit here naively and tell you that rev share agreements or NIL agreements or collective agreements or whatever it's going to look like. I'm not going to act like it doesn't matter. It would be stupid and naive. We're all, grown adults here. Money matters to all of us. It's not, I'm not sitting here saying that it doesn't. And it would be stupid for me to sit here and say that. But I will say, I am curious, and again, this is more curiosity in question, how much these in-homes are going to make a difference. Because Mike Bobo is making 2 trips. Like, he's going to be there today as we record this. And then he'll be back on May 4th, the night before Jared makes his decision. And it is clear that Georgia still sees the importance of going in home, making these last final visits and, making that more emotional impression in a world that is very business driven in terms of how these decisions are being made. I'm not even going to sit here and tell you as of April 30th what I think Jared's decision is going to be, because I'll be honest with you, I think Georgia feels good. Oregon feels good. And I don't think that either team has been given an answer yet. And so I don't think that there is a decision. If there is a decision that Jared has, I think that he has held that within. I don't think that he's told family. I don't think that he's told representatives. Like, they might be able to, get an inkling here or there based on how he's talked about certain things over the last couple of weeks. But I really do think this is a decision that will be finalized when Mike Bobo and Oregon offensive coordinator Will Stein, when they leave Nashville on Sunday, I think they will sit down, have that final conversation, and he will let everyone know what he's going to do. He will have a ceremony on May 5th. What I'll say is this, on the Jared, on a prediction front, because I'm not going to sit here and give a prediction, but Georgia wants Jared Curtis very badly. I think Kirby Smart and Mike Bobo see short-term and long-term value to winning this high-profile quarterback recruitment. And they've struggled in these over the last few cycles, whether it be not being able to win them on the front end or getting kind of shocked on the back end with some surprises like in the Dylan Raiola situation. I think that Kirby Smart and Mike Bobo see this as an opportunity to prove people wrong, that Georgia can find its guy at quarterback and they can secure him and sign him. I do think that proximity matters. I'm not going to say that that's going to be what tips the scales for Georgia, but I do think, I don't know whether Oregon is going to make 2 in-home visits or not. I know that there was some conversation about whether they just go May 4th or whether they end up, going sometime this week as well. If they only end up making 1, I think that that's somewhat indicative of the challenge of the travel around it. Like, these Oregon coaches, they've got a bunch of places that they've got to get to during this window. And making 2 trips out to Nashville, yeah, it's your quarterback. Yeah, it's a guy that you really want. But to my point earlier, how much do in-home visits still matter in this day and age? I don't really know. But I think the fact that Oregon might only be taking 1 tells you a lot about how it's a lot easier for Mike Bobo to get up and take 2 in-home visits than it is for Oregon to get down and do the same. So I do lean toward that proximity mattering, and obviously the relationships that he has with Bobo and Kirby and the fact that he was committed there in the first place and he took multiple visits throughout the spring. I would lean Georgia, but I'm certainly not predicting Georgia. I would like to think that by the morning of May 5th, I will be able to sit here with a prediction, or not sit here, but sit, on Dogs 24/7 with a prediction for you that is a little bit more based in intel and not based on just reading the tea leaves or how things are feeling right now. Jordan, I know, you're following this pretty closely as well. And I know you had Jared on your predicted commit team. Where do you feel like, just your read, where do you feel like things are at right now?
Yeah, it's one of those things. I think the last Stay Wolk we did, I said he goes to Oregon, and it's hard for me really to get a read. And you hit on the biggest thing to me. I really don't think either school knows at this point. I think that if they have made a decision that it's not gotten relayed to those coaches, which again, that kind of adds some value to these in-home visits at a time, as you really well explained, that we feel like in-home visits don't have the same pop that they used to. So fascinated to hear what we, learn what we can out of these visits, because, this is going to be a decision that sets up both programs, sort of the road forward for both. And I did want to ask you on that front, we've talked about Bo Bentley for Georgia. If Jared Curtis doesn't pan out, if he picks Oregon, do you have any kind of sense on the Oregon side? Do you feel like they have a contingency plan in place? Which I know it's difficult to ask you that because you don't cover Oregon recruiting. But I have to imagine, both of these teams will be ready to pivot if they have to, although that's not what they want to do come May 5th.
Well, it's interesting because one of the things that made me start feeling a lot worse about Georgia's chances with Jared Curtis was when Jonas Williams, who was committed to Oregon, flipped to USC. And I thought, Oregon wouldn't just be letting a guy as talented as Jonas Williams flip at a time like this when they're still, trying to land Jared and they don't know that they're going to be able to get him. So I thought that maybe there was a confidence level at Oregon that was allowing them to do that. The more that I've gathered on the situation, that really wasn't the case. It was that Oregon was, much like Georgia, was going all in a sense with Jared Curtis, in that Jared was their number one guy, and Jared was who they were going to pursue until they got a final answer, and then they would really pick things up with whoever their other quarterback targets were. I bring that up because, Jonas Williams is committed to USC right now. He just flipped this spring. You would think he flipped to USC. Of course, he's going to stick with USC, and I'm not ruling out that that's the case. I will say there's been some buzz around USC and Ryder Lyons, another West Coast quarterback, recently, and that has me wondering, if Ryder Lyons ends up at USC, we know how the quarterback dominoes sort of work. Very rarely are you taking two quarterbacks, especially two elite caliber quarterbacks, and so it does, make me wonder, does Oregon turn back to Jonas Williams? Do they have other options out there as well? I don't think that Oregon is able to just get into a recruitment that they're not in right now. But I will say Oregon has a little bit more weight than a lot of other places, when we're talking, financially, brand value, Dan Lanning, what their offense has done. They just had a Heisman finalist at quarterback that transferred in. I think that Oregon has a lot of options in terms of pursuing the transfer portal. They obviously have a guy in Dante Moore on campus that's going to be playing for the foreseeable future, you would think. But I also think that there are guys that are not really considering Oregon right now, that if Jared Curtis commits to Georgia on May 5th, Oregon can pick up the phone and say, hey, we didn't get our guy. We will really like you as our next quarterback up. This is what your package looks like. This is why Oregon is an appealing place. And I think that a lot of guys are going to be receptive to that. And so, I think that Oregon probably has a security blanket. And again, the fact that they've got Dante Moore there gives them a little bit more flexibility, because I just don't know how quickly anyone is going to be playing there, which is another fascinating part of the Jared Curtis conversation. It's I don't necessarily see him as a year one guy at Oregon. It's hard to envision a scenario that he's a year one guy at Georgia, just the way that Kirby Smart handles veteran quarterbacks and knowing the offense and those types of things, and not knowing, what Gunnar Stockton's career is going to look like, not knowing how Ryan Puglisi is going to develop throughout the year. It's hard to say, and also not knowing whether Georgia pursues a transfer portal guy at the end of the year as well. And so I think it's a fascinating part. And if we want to get into the weeds of it, if you're an agent in a school that's negotiating all of this, it becomes doubly confusing on how to handle it, because if you're an agent, you want your guy to sign as big of a 2-3 year deal as they can. If you're a school, you got to be smart with it, because you want to divvy up your rev share so that you've got a full roster. And if you're, putting too much in year one towards a guy like Jared Curtis or another guy that we're about to talk about, Jackson Cantwell, and they're not seen as year one guys, because there aren't a whole lot of year one guys at Georgia, are you using too much of your salary cap on players that aren't going to be playing? That's something that I think a lot of these coaching staffs are running into. It's why a lot of places are probably hiring GMs. But again, how much power do those GMs have compared to head coaches? I think it's very little in most cases. There's, probably 2 or 3 GMs across the country. Andrew Luck is probably one at Stanford that you could point to, where it's like they're kind of running the program, whereas everywhere else, the head coaches are running the program and the GMs are, trusted, well respected within the building, but very rarely are they the ones getting to call the final shots across college football.
It's pretty wild just to think about that balancing act again, when it comes to like rev share, because it's coming into play in the middle of all this. This isn't like, hey, we just started a football team and we have rev share. I mean, you've got guys already on the roster. I really don't envy those guys that are in charge of making those decisions and deciding how they want to divvy everything out. And I did want to just say too, it would be so wild after all of this if it plays out where Jared Curtis, who was previously committed to Georgia, commits to Georgia, and then in the end, Jonas Williams, who was previously committed to Oregon, winds up going back to Oregon. Obviously, there are a million things that could play out to make that happen, but it would be kind of wild if it all just kind of went back to the way it was set up before.
That would be. And you don't see recommitments very often, which is why I've been hesitant on the Jared Curtis side of things, because you don't really see it. But quarterback recruitments are different. I mean, if you need more evidence, Georgia doesn't do a lot of in-home visits nowadays. They go to a lot of practices. They go to these high schools. They're really only doing in-home visits with you if you're a quarterback or there's someone that they know they're going to sign. So the fact that Georgia's, going in home and doing this with quarterbacks, and quarterback recruitments are just different. So it's hard to just say, you don't see recommitments very often, but it is true. And if it was a domino effect where they ended up back in their previous spots, I will also say if Georgia doesn't get Jared Curtis, you mentioned Bo Bentley, and I'll talk about him in a little bit too, because Mike Bobo went to go see him earlier this week as well. Jonas Williams is a name that I have wondered if Georgia would find a way to get into. He was Talon Taylor's 7-on-7 quarterback last year. There are some relationships there. I don't think that Georgia is super well connected in that recruitment beyond that, and that's probably a preventative factor. But again, this quarterback domino, it's like Georgia's going to end up with someone. Like Georgia's going to find a quarterback. It's, they might still go portal at the end of the year. That's possible, but like they're not going to come out empty-handed from this 2026 recruiting class. And so, I expect it to be one of Jared Curtis or Bo Bentley or possibly Landon Duckworth. But if there is somebody else out there that Georgia has kind of been waiting, and like I said with Oregon, like Georgia can pick up the phone too and make some calls on May 6th when they miss on Jared Curtis. And there are going to be some receptive ears around the country saying like, Georgia's interested in me now when they weren't before. We're getting into the official visit season. There might be some guys committed elsewhere that Georgia has, been curious about that they might rev things up for. Like these are the types of things that happen with quarterback recruiting this time of year. I did want to give some updates on, and we talked about this on a previous Junkyard Dawgcast as well, but I figured I would get a little bit more into the details of it on this recruiting episode with a couple of decisions that were scheduled. We're recording this on April 30th. This was supposed to be Jackson Cantwell's, 5-star offensive lineman Jackson Cantwell. This was supposed to be his commitment date. He had scheduled this out, and look, when you're represented by Drew Rosenhaus's agency, it's very rare that I would expect, some shifting around and things like that. But that just goes to show you, one, how delicate these decisions are and how, business oriented some of the conversations that need to have happen are. And then also, I will say the power that some of these programs still have to be able to dictate the schedule. And what I mean by that is, Jackson Cantwell was going to commit on April 30th without having visited Georgia during the football season last year and without having visited Georgia during the spring. And I think that would be an alarming reality for Georgia. If I hadn't probably considered it enough, but if you really think about it, if you're going to be going to a college and you're going to be committing there before you take your official visits in the summer, not going to see them play during your junior year and not going to see them during spring practices or at some point during the spring is probably a red flag. the reason I haven't viewed it as a red flag is because Jackson Cantwell has visited Georgia more than anywhere else that he's strongly considering, especially of the out-of-state options, because he has connections. I've talked time and time again about Reese Hoffa and the track and field connections that his family has to the University of Georgia, how easy it is for them to stay in Athens for a few days when they come on visits. And the fact that he wasn't going to visit Georgia before this original April 30th decision was a concern. He has since moved that commitment date back to May 13th, and he will take a visit to Georgia, an unofficial visit, which is also important, I think, an unofficial visit to Georgia on May 10th. Much like I did with Jared Curtis's, visits earlier in the year, even though he might still take another official visit in the summer, I think of this visit like an official visit for Jackson Cantwell, because it very well is the last time that you're going to be able to get him on campus. And so, or before he makes a decision at least. And so it's Oregon, it's Miami, it's Georgia, depending on, which site or whose crystal balls or RPMs you trust. You've seen picks in for Miami. I think that's, 24/7. I think someone just had a Miami pick go in yesterday. I've seen some Oregon picks out there. I think that our old friend Steve Wiltfong, I know he's with the enemy now at On3, but he has, I worked with him. He's a trusted guy in the business. He put in a Georgia pick. There's picks everywhere. What does that tell me? Nobody knows. If people knew, there wouldn't be 5 different picks for 3 different schools. It's if everyone knew, there would be a little bit more alignment. I do think that the reason why people don't know is because Jackson Cantwell has not, either he doesn't know or he has not told anyone. And I think there's a lot of guessing going on, a lot of tea leaf reading going on. I think he was just on an official visit to Oregon this past weekend. Naturally, there's going to be Oregon buzz with him coming off of an Oregon visit, just like there was Miami buzz coming off of a Miami visit. I would expect when he leaves Georgia after that May 10th visit, guess what? There's going to be Georgia buzz. None of that buzz actually matters. It really just matters what Jackson Cantwell's decision is going to be on May 13th. And look, I really do like where Georgia stands in this, and I do like the fact that Jackson Cantwell was willing to adjust his schedule to accommodate getting Georgia on the schedule. Because if, I don't want to throw anyone under the bus, but he had a top 6. Michigan's included in that top 6. If Michigan had called him and was like, hey, we'd love to get you on campus one more time before you make that decision, would you move that back to May 10th? That wasn't going to happen. Now, he's cut it to a top 4 that didn't include Michigan, which is why it's easy for me to sort of throw them out there as the one. But he wasn't just going to make that accommodation for anyone. Quite frankly, he had just been to Ohio State. He probably wasn't going to make that accommodation for Ohio State. He had been to Miami this spring. Probably wasn't going to accommodate getting one last visit to Miami. But the fact that Georgia was able to be the one that got his schedule shifted around, it tells me 2 things. One, it tells me Georgia's got a shot, or they wouldn't have made the effort to get him on campus. And, the fact that he was willing to change things around tells you something. It also tells me that Georgia doesn't think they've got the guy. And I said this on our Tuesday show. If Georgia felt like they had Jackson Cantwell and it was signed, sealed, delivered, they had him locked in, they were not getting his schedule rearranged for him to be on a visit on May 10th, because they would have just kept it quiet, gotten him to commit on April 30th. He would have taken one official visit in the summer, and it would have been to Georgia. And so I will say, if I'm Miami, I maybe am feeling a little bit good right now, because Oregon and Georgia felt the need to squeeze their way onto his schedule almost, I don't want to say anxiously, but it was I think we're in the anxious hours of this recruitment. And I think that Oregon was like, all right, we're not feeling great. We got to get him on an official visit. Georgia, haven't gotten him on a visit the last 2 semesters, got to get him on a visit before he makes this decision. And I think that Miami might be sitting there, a little bit, all right, we just had him on campus. Mario Cristobal recruits these offensive linemen really well. I know the guy from IMG Academy that they also really like has had some USC buzz too, which makes me think there's no way Mario Cristobal misses on both of his top 2 offensive line targets, right? He never does that. So these are the types of things that I'm thinking about. And I would be a liar if I sat here and said, oh yeah, he's definitely going here, he's definitely going there. Or even if I made a prediction, it would just be a guess. Anybody listening to this could really make as good of a prediction as I could right now. I'm just trying to, piece together what makes the most sense based on how I've seen these recruitments go. And then, see what I hear coming out of that May 10th visit. Because ultimately in the Georgia world, that's what's going to dictate this recruitment.
Two things there on the Canwell recruitment. One, some of the Georgia predictions out there, I can't confirm it, but I think a lot of that had to do with Ben Wolk picking Jackson Cantwell in his predicted commit all those weeks ago. Surely that's what sort of got the tidal wave going there. But two, just as someone, I'm not really in the recruiting world that much. I mean, you do that for our site, and I follow along and help where I can, but I kind of like that there are some of these recruitments that we don't know. Just as a fan of college football, I think about, every February signing day now, our board is just people saying, man, I miss how it used to be, where you were tuning in and you were like, man, I hope we get this 4-star wide receiver we don't know about, and we find out together. And I know that's harder for the recruiting reporters because you want to try to get that intel you want to know beforehand, but I kind of like that there's some high-profile recruitments that Georgia's in where we just don't know one way or the other. We're following along, and maybe we will learn stuff leading up to that final decision. But I just think it's fun for these fan bases to follow along, get a little intrigue in what's going to happen with some of the top recruits in the country.
I do agree. It is probably more fun from an entertainment standpoint. Like I think, and I know it didn't go Georgia's way, but the way the Justice Terry recruitment unfolded at the end of the cycle last year, it creates more intrigue. And I remember when Nakobe Dean threw on the Georgia hat when he committed, and everyone's just like, what? How did this happen? It was not what anyone was expecting. I was covering Auburn at the time, and I remember an Auburn coach coming down, and they didn't think they were getting Nakobe at that point, but they were still in it, and they were stunned at what they had just watched. That is fun. That said, I'd prefer to know what's going on, Jordan. For the sake of our subscribers, I'd prefer to know what's going on so I can keep them as informed as possible.
A professional all the way, that Benjamin Wolk.
I will note, because our national team reported this yesterday, so I feel a little bit more at liberty to talk about it. The belief is that 3-year, $2 million a year is about what this is looking at, which is a crazy number. If we're just being honest, it is wild to think about it. We're talking about potential $13.5 million cap. Obviously, there are opportunities for guys like Jackson Cantwell and Jared Curtis to probably go above the cap with real NIL deals that will be approved by the clearinghouse. That said, that's still, a guy like Jackson Cantwell, a great player, an offensive lineman that Georgia absolutely wants and probably won't take another offensive lineman until they get an answer on Jackson Cantwell. He might not play year one. How many freshman offensive linemen are we seeing play for Georgia? And quite frankly, if you're a Georgia fan, do you want freshman offensive linemen playing? Is that a good sign for your program? Probably not. If you are a freak show like Broderick Jones, maybe it can work. But even Amarius Mims is a freak show, and it took him 2.5 years to really be getting into the rotation the way that he would have liked to be. I have been told, and again, I take this with a little bit of a grain of salt just because I'm not sitting there looking at these contracts. You're having to go off of what agent side people are telling you, what program side people are telling you, and trying to read the BS in between all of that. I believe that Georgia is coming in under that number that was reported. And I think that it's smart to be. Honestly would be surprised if either of the other two would be that high. But I also understand the caliber of player that Cantwell is, the importance of having that surefire offensive tackle. And it's 3 programs. You think of Kirby Smart, Dan Lanning, and Mario Cristobal. They love them some offensive linemen. They know the importance of the position. And so it's the one thing that makes me think it could get there. And, look, he's represented by Drew Rosenhaus's agency. Drew Rosenhaus is as good at his job as anybody is at their job. So it isn't shocking to see that figure out there, but based on what I've heard, I do expect that number to be a little bit lower than that, at least from what I know on the Georgia side. The other recruitment the commitment date that was shifted back was Malcolm Gaston, offensive lineman from North Augusta. South Carolina. I won't even beat around the bush on this. He was going to be committing on May 2nd. I would have fully expected Georgia to be the decision on May 2nd. I think that we both had pretty good information suggesting that it was trending that direction. I think it's multiple parts. One, like I just said, I don't think Georgia's taking an offensive lineman until they get another offensive lineman until they get an answer on Jackson Cantwell. I think because of the stressors that puts on you financially and also just how important it is making sure you get him into the class, I think Georgia wants to know what it's working with heading into other decisions. Like if they get Cantwell, I'm using a phrase that I overuse and you know that I hate that I use it, but I think it changes the math on which offensive linemen you are able to get, because you're not going to get Jackson Cantwell and 4 other super, high dollar recruitments on the offensive line. That's just unrealistic. Other position groups are going to need those finances as well. If you don't get Jackson Cantwell, well, I think that opens up the door a little bit for, are there some other tackles nationally or maybe some interior offensive linemen where you can take a shot at them a little bit more because you've got a little bit more to work with than you thought you were going to because you didn't get Jackson Cantwell. And so I think I say that because I think Georgia still has some evaluations that it wants to do on the interior offensive line. I'm going to see one they really like here later today. They've obviously got Malcolm Gaston. I maybe prematurely made the decision to flip Malcolm Gaston or Desmond Green from my predicted commit team and replace him with Malcolm Gaston. That could turn out to be a little bit of a regrettable decision depending on how things turn out during this evaluation period. But I think that Georgia will try to get as many of these linemen that they can on campus for the June 1 elite summer camp that they have. And, they try and get guys on campus for that camp every single year. It's really important to them. But if they are still evaluating you, I don't want to say if you're not a take yet, because Zayden Walker camped at that last year and Georgia took him 3 days later. So it's not a matter of will they take you or not without the summer camp. But I think that summer camp is a great tool for you to prove to the Georgia staff why you're the right choice. And so I think that it's very likely you see Malcolm Gaston at a camp. You see Desmond Green at a camp. There's probably some interior guys around the state of Georgia that we haven't talked about as much that probably don't have Georgia offers right now that you'll likely see them there as well. And I think just this spring eval period, Stacey Searles getting out and seeing some of these guys and then getting their hands on them in a camp in June. I don't expect to see a decision from Malcolm Gaston until after that window. And so we'll see how that ends up playing out. I still would favor Georgia over any of the other programs right now. I just think a little bit of, offensive line board work needs to figure itself out before that ends up being finalized.
Yeah, with situations like that, if you're a Georgia coach and you want to know for sure, get them in a camp, get your hands on these guys and see them in action because, going to these practices is valuable, but when you got them in, on your campus going through a camp and you can kind of dictate what you want to see and what you're looking for. I mean, if he checks all the boxes, I would expect Malcolm Gaston to be a Georgia commit, but it's one of those things. I see the value in Georgia waiting and trying to get a chance to see him up close before we find out where he winds up going to college.
But as of right now, Gaston does not have a new commitment date scheduled. And like I said, at this point now, I think he'll take his summer official visits, let that sort itself out. I mean, I guess there's a world where, he goes to that camp on June 1 and he's the best offensive lineman that Georgia's ever seen. And Georgia says, we can't afford to get too deep into this month where you're going and visiting all these other places. But I would expect him to probably take his official visits, take his time at this point, and then make a decision at the end of June or July. But he's definitely someone that would, obviously, he was originally going to have a May 2nd commitment date. He would like to have this thing done sooner rather than later. Like I said, I'm on the road this week and next week and the week after that, which means Georgia coaches are also on the road this week, next week, and the week after that as well. I'm not going to get into every single place that Georgia coaches have been, because quite frankly, I probably don't even know every place that they've been. They probably stopped by some places, while they've been out and about that I wasn't even aware of. But I did want to call out some of the more interesting stops that I feel like Georgia coaches have made this week. And so I mentioned already Mike Bobo is obviously going to see Jared Curtis on Wednesday. He was in Texas to see Bo Bentley earlier this week as well. And that's notable because, I've been told by sources on multiple sides that Georgia is approaching Bo Bentley's recruitment as if he is their top target. Like, they are treating him that way. They are visiting him that way. They're communicating with him that way. The only difference is that Jared Curtis has a commitment date on May 5th. And I think, again, probably, I don't want to say Georgia dictated that, but I think that Georgia and Oregon both were wanting to get that commitment taken care of so that if they missed on him, they can figure things out. And so I think Georgia's in a pretty safe spot right now where, they can treat Bo Bentley like he is quarterback one. They can go visit him, go see him practice, go see him throw like they did earlier this week, spend some time with the family. And if May 5th comes around and Jared Curtis commits to Georgia, look, Bo Bentley knows what the deal is. He knows that if Georgia gets Jared Curtis, he's probably not even wanting to go to Georgia anyway because of what that will mean for the depth chart. But if Jared Curtis commits to Oregon on May 5th, Georgia is wise to have been treating Bo Bentley over the last month plus or so as if he was as valuable of a quarterback recruit as Jared Curtis is, because I think Georgia has hung around here. I've said this before. I think Georgia has hung around here more than people have credited them for, given that they offered a little bit later, given that Oklahoma and LSU had a little bit more buzz at times throughout the spring. Again, I've said it. I felt like if Oklahoma and LSU were a surefire thing that he wanted to do, he would have just done it already. Why does he need to wait until these summer official visits? I think that he wants to see Georgia at a slightly different level. He will see LSU and Oklahoma at a little bit of a different level as well on those official visits. But it's telling to me that Mike Bobo, the same week that he's going to make 2 visits to go see Jared Curtis, that he's still going out to Texas and going in home with Bo Bentley. Josh Crawford, we've talked about the 2 elite running backs that he's going after. Savion Hyder from Virginia, Derek Cooper from Florida. He went to go see Savion Hyder first thing this week. He's going to see Derek Cooper, or went to go see Derek Cooper on Wednesday. I'm currently battling we're recording this on Wednesday, and you're going to be listening to this probably on Thursday. So I apologize if I say a date and you are like, Ben has lost his damn mind. He doesn't know what day it is. But on Wednesday, he went to go see Derek Cooper. Georgia would really like to add one of those 2 guys and then someone from in the state of Georgia as well. So it's not a surprise that Josh Crawford went to go see Savion Hyder and Derek Cooper, but notable that he went nonetheless. Tight end, another unsurprising one. Mark Bowman. Todd Hartley goes out west to go see Mark Bowman. He's tight end 1. Like, you're sort of getting the sense here, right? Like, Georgia coaches go out on the road, and it's the first week that they can go out on the road, and they go see Jared Curtis, Bo Bentley, Savion Hyder, Derek Cooper, Mark Bowman. Like, it kind of speaks for itself. James Coley is going to be going to see Ryan Mosley, who I was out to see on Wednesday morning. James Coley is going to be out there to go see him on Thursday. So, you can sort of put 2 and 2 together. This is the week of who's sort of at the top of Georgia's board and getting Georgia figured out. Now, that's not 100% the case because, a guy like Caden Prothrow, for instance, I just was over at his school before we started recording this to go see him. He's in baseball season. They don't really start doing football things until May 12th. So there are some outliers where Georgia coaches would rather see them on a football field if they can. And so they're going to wait and go, based on their schedules. But yeah, on the offensive side of the ball, it's pretty easy to see, Georgia's going after their top recruits on the road this week.
No, it makes a lot of sense, and it kind of goes into when we talk about recruits toward the end of their recruitment and paying attention to where they're visiting, especially like in the portal. It's like if you're getting a visit, that says a lot about your team's chances of getting those guys. So to see the coaches now that they're out on the road hitting those priority targets, it makes a lot of sense. And I'm just fascinated, and this isn't necessarily just a Georgia thing, but how these college coaches sort of walk that fine line between these quarterbacks. I mean, because, it's no secret that Georgia really, really wants Jared Curtis, but I give a lot of credit to players like Bo Bentley and go back and talked about it quite a bit with Ryan Puglisi when Dylan Raiola was in the picture of they understand. I could understand a competitive person being like, what the heck? Like, why am I not the top guy on your board? But I think it's pretty common that these guys understand, how the game is played, and that they're willing to listen. And Georgia hopes if it doesn't get Jared Curtis that pays off. And, if the consolation prize for Georgia is Bo Bentley, that's a hell of a consolation prize as far as I'm concerned.
No doubt. Yeah. I mean, I'm one of his biggest advocates. I'm a strong believer in Bo Bentley, the guy, as well as Bo Bentley, the player. And I'll say that too. Like, I think, especially when you're talking about maybe your, quarterback 1B options or your quarterback 2 options, like, I think that it requires, maybe even more so than your QB1 option, like a real serious character eval. Like, these have to be egoless guys, because you got to know, like, you have to know that player is going to be willing to see a whole news cycle around Jared Curtis play out and not take it personally that you might be viewed as the afterthought option within that fan base, or, just, by that coaching staff potentially. And so I think that you got to be careful, because not every quarterback is going to be willing to hear that. Not every quarterback is going to be wanting to say, oh, wow, you're going after this 5-star guy as well. Like, what am I doing here? But I think that and it's not just the player eval, honestly, it's also the family eval. Like, I won't even beat around the bush. Like, quarterback families sometimes are wild. Like, you get like quarterback parents sometimes are the, most difficult to deal with. And that's a story as old as football. So I'm not breaking any news when I say that. But I think that you have to know, like, do you have a family that understands where you're coming from and what the process is like and the business element that goes into all of this? And at least in the case of Bo Bentley, it feels like they are fully understanding of that and appreciative of how Georgia has been open with them on that as well. One other coach on the road that was notable and interesting to me that I will bring up is Glenn Schumann. He was out at Gainesville High School on Tuesday morning. Stacey Searles and Josh Crawford were also there, so I think there's a bunch of young guys that they're taking a look at too. Glenn Schumann obviously is taking a look at USC linebacker commit Xavier Griffin. I still like where USC stands, and I know it's weird to say just because we've seen so many guys from Georgia commit to USC and then end up not signing with USC. It feels more solid than some other ones, but the fact that Glenn Schumann and a bunch of other coaches, I think Florida was out there with a bunch of staff yesterday, the fact that they're all still going to check in on him tells me that they have heard something, that he is at least listening to options outside. That said, much like with the offensive line stuff around Jackson Canwell, it's like if Georgia gets Tyler Atkinson, it's going to be really hard to get another elite level linebacker with the way that these things are going nowadays.
The one thing I would just say is I think this is sort of a make or break year for Lincoln Riley at USC. So, it's probably not a bad idea to kind of keep tabs on an in-state guy with that kind of talent. If things don't go well for USC, I don't know if Lincoln Riley gets fired, but he certainly would have a whole lot more pressure on him going into 2026.
No, that's a great point. All right. We're going to do, I think we went about 20 to 25 minutes with Elo Modozie. And I will say, I learned this on the call with him. It is Elo, not Elo. I've said Elo a couple of times. So I issued the promise to him that I would give the disclaimer and try and get as many people to get it right going forward as possible. So he's exactly what you would expect an Army transfer to be, like an interview with an Army transfer. Like, he's I think he said yes, sir, to start the question or to start his answer. It's like 95% of the questions, which I tell these guys all the time. Anytime a 6'3", 245-pound dude with NFL future draft stock is saying yes, sir, to me, I always get a little bit uncomfortable. So I did request afterwards that for any future interviews we do, that he tries his best to eliminate, the Army in him. But it's going to be hard to do because he talked a lot about culture and experience and things like that he had at Army and why Georgia was such a great fit for him. So you're going to really enjoy that interview. Before we take a quick ad break and jump into that interview, I do, as always, want to highly recommend a Dogs 24/7 subscription. We got a promo going right now, Jordan?
I don't think we have a promo right now, but I promise you guys, if you keep an eye out, we, it's worth getting it at 100%, but we run deals throughout the year.
Well, I do think it's worth getting it at 100% because that gets you the Paramount Plus immediately. So that's, to me, one of the reasons why I get the promos. It sounds nice. You don't get the Paramount Plus. That said, we will have promos coming up as well if you're not so worried about the Paramount Plus side of things coming up with official visits and those types of things. But I do highly recommend a Dogs 24/7 subscription. Like I said, I'll be on the road doing recruiting stuff over the next few weeks, and then that'll get us right into official visit season where everything from a recruiting standpoint happens in June and July. Nowadays, we'll obviously have things that are going on with football off season, basketball off season. Olivia's doing an unbelievable job with baseball, and it seems that they might have, turned things back around after a little bit of a slow stretch. So definitely do that. Subscribe. If you're watching this on YouTube, please subscribe to the channel. Please like it. Please throw a comment in there. We would really appreciate that. If you listen on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, we really appreciate y'all because y'all are actually the biggest audiences that we have. So please subscribe there as well. We really appreciate everyone wherever it is that you listen. We will jump to a quick ad break, and when we come back, you will hear from Elo Modozie. Welcome in to the show a very, very, very special guest. We've got 6'3", 245-pound edge from Army by way of Bartram Trail in Jacksonville. Led Army with 6.5 sacks last year, 8.5 tackles for a loss. He was Georgia's highest-ranked player in the 24/7 Sports transfer portal rankings this spring. Our first transfer guest this cycle, I believe. It's Elo Modozie. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for having me.
And let's start there. I've heard it Elo. I've heard it Elo. Did we get it right for the people at the start there?
Yes, sir. It's Elo.
All right, awesome. We'll make sure to get that right. I always like to be a pronunciation guide for every other show that does this as well. But we're going to get into a lot during the course of this interview. I really wanted to start with this, though. I know we were going to do the interview at 2. We needed to shift it to 3. You've got some class and things going on. Like, what all do you have to wrap up at Army before you're able to actually get to Athens?
Yes, sir. So we're finishing up the semester. We're like in the last, I would say last 2 weeks. We're done with our final exams. Probably like May 15th is like the last week we'll have. But yeah, we're like same old classes we'll have. So I actually got out of philosophy. It was like a 2-hour class, so it's a long-winded class. But yeah, just finishing up classes.
Cool. When do you actually get to Athens?
Yes, sir. My target date, I'm trying to get there around May 19th. That's like the target. Nothing's confirmed yet, though.
What is it like? What does a day in the life look for you like right now? Like, is it the same as it's always been, or is it different now that you're going to be leaving after this semester?
It's different, just in terms of how my schedule looks. Just kind of planning my time around classes and getting a workout in and just doing all those stuff while not being on the team. That down here is just things I've been navigating, but it's been going good.
Awesome. Well, we're gonna get into the Georgia side of things in a minute, but I wanted to actually start with Army just because it's fascinating to me. I think it's fascinating to a lot of other people as well. You don't see Service Academy transfers super often, and I'm sure it was a really difficult decision for you. Can you kind of take us through the process of what led to the decision to enter the portal in the first place and why you felt it was the right move for you?
Yes, sir. Yeah. So definitely been like a hard. The whole situation's been hard. It's kind of been something that's been weighing on me for a while. Just but through prayer, through just talking to the people that are close to me, they always have my best interest, and just felt like at this point in my life, like where I'm trying to go with my career, I just felt as if there was a different path that I needed to go to get to where I wanted to be, and I still credit a lot of my success that I've had here to Army. Obviously, this is where I started. This is everything that where I started myself. So give a lot of credit to those guys, to all my coaches down here. They'll never go for granted. But yeah, ultimately it was just I left it up to God, and He's led me here so far, and I'm excited to see what's ahead.
I mean, I imagine, being at Army, like the conversations you're having are a little bit different than just every run-of-the-mill transfer. Yeah. Like you're having to think long-term decisions in a way that others aren't necessarily. And so I'm curious, like I imagine at some point during your time at Army, you realize like, wait a minute, I've got a potential NFL future here. I've got to look at this thing differently. Like when did that happen for you?
Yes, sir. So we have a date that's called affirmation, essentially your first 2 years at West Point is like you're not binded to the Army. It's kind of like no commitment service. You're kind of just here like as a student, but you're still a cadet. You're still obviously doing everything that everyone else is doing, but you're not binded to go to the Army like upon your first day here. So actually your first day of your junior year is when you have to sign the paper to actually be in the Army for the next after you graduate, and then for the next 5 years after that. So like all that just played into the part. I'm just thinking about like what do I want for my future, and like what do I want my future to look like. And the Army is great. It's provided great opportunities. It's shaped me as a person. Like just in terms of doing hard things, like this school has done. More than that. It's brought me just to a different confidence level too, and just like a different work ethic. So always credit that to West Point for sure.
For sure. That you saved me. I appreciate the education there, because you saved me from asking a stupid question later on in the interview where I think I was going to say, like, is there any world where you go and serve later on, or how does that play in? But yeah, I guess that's a stupid question at this point, or is it still in the cards?
No, sir. So you're not binded if you don't sign the paper upon your junior year. So
on that affirmation day. All right, cool. So, like I mentioned, you got to Army. You were originally from Jacksonville, Bartram Trail. And a quick sidebar here: do you know Joey Gatewood by any chance?
I do.
This is small world. No, I guess not small world. I work in recruiting, but I used to cover Auburn back in the day.
Okay.
And I think he was one of the very first recruits that I was ever interviewing or talking to. He was the quarterback there at the time. He ended up going to Auburn when I was covering there. So send Joey my regards for me.
Gotcha.
But I say all that. You're at Bartram Trail. You had one FBS offer out of high school, Army, and that's where you ended up going. But it wasn't to be an edge rusher. It was to be a wide receiver, and that's where you started. And so before I ask about that switch and what went into all of that, like tell me a little bit about your game as a wide receiver. What kind of receiver were you?
Yes, sir, for sure. I mean, my whole life I thought I was going to be a receiver. I thought I was going to, retire receiver, someday down the line. I love to model my game after like a Julio Jones or DeAndre Hopkins. Like I always watched those guys when I was little. Just working out every day, trying to get to that point. I see myself like as a deep threat. I was going down there. I would like to take the top off of defenses. Do all that. But at the same time, I also took pride in blocking too. So I mean, that's hence the reason why Army got a hold of me. But I love blocking. I love just posing my will on people. Just being that physical receiver.
If Kirby still needed you in like a goal line situation or something like that, could you get the job done?
Come on. I'm ready. Let's do it.
All right. So you get to Army, you're there as a wide receiver. How quick, like it sounds like it was really within your first year there that you made that switch to to defense. Like how did that happen? What went into that change?
Yes, sir. So it really started on my senior year of high school. I was actually convinced to play defense my senior year of high school. I was hesitant, I didn't really know if that was the route to go. I didn't have any, I'm just thinking about the future. Like I didn't have any offers. I didn't have any offers at that point. It's senior year, that's your last year. So like in my mind, I'm thinking like, is this the right point of time to make that type of switch? But my coaches were like persistent on it, and they were confident that I would do a good job. And I played that season, and it actually went well. Nothing offer wise came from it, but so then I committed to Army, still as a receiver. I went over there, and my coach, we started doing our first day of like what do you call it, like workouts with the receivers. And it's not, Army's offense, we're not the traditional, like go to the numbers and we start running routes. For day one, we're in the box. We're doing a stance called a flex stance, like where your feet is like 2 feet apart from each other. And I'm just like I don't think this is where I'm supposed to be. Just last year I was in the backfield on defenses, and I was like having fun in football. Like that's what I wanted to do. And I went to my coach, and I asked him. I said, "Coach, like, what do you think about me playing defense? I think this is somewhere where I can thrive. I think this is somewhere where I can, go out there and make something happen and just play freely." And they weren't really hearing it at first. They weren't really, they didn't really entertain it for that much. But eventually, they trusted me, and here we are.
I think I read in an article that it was like the Bartram Trail recruiting coordinator or someone was recommending to you at the time that you should be doing. Like, who should we be giving the kudos for seeing the vision before anyone else did?
Yes, sir. Coach Parker from Bartram Trail. Yeah.
Coach Chad Parker.
Parker, yes, sir.
Yeah, shout out Coach Parker. He was there when Joey Gatewood was there as well. So shout out him.
Yeah,
he saw the vision. All right, so you switched to defense. You're at the time, from what I have seen, 6'3", 195 range.
Exactly.
You get to 245. Like, I could probably have McDonald's for a few months and get to 245, but I imagine it looks a little differently for you. Like, what is the nutrition plan, workout plan? Like, what does that look like, and how long did it take you to get from 195 to 245?
Yes, sir. So prior to going to the academy here, I took a year at prep, it's still at West Point. It's a prep. It's basically just essentially the prep school for West Point.
Cool.
And just there, that was a big part. As far as gaining muscle mass and just weight in general. Our strength coordinator there, Coach Nichols, he did a great job. Our schedule every day and just like our routine that we did every day was very very. In terms of just like having knowing what we're doing and executing it every single day, at a high level, high intensity. Like, we were always in there just having fun, but getting good work done as well. So I credit all that to him. That's like where I gained my first like 20 to 30 pounds. And it was all good weight. I didn't lose any speed, but it felt good.
How long did it take for it to click for you? Like, all right, I'm not just a receiver trying to play on the edge. Like, I've got some serious potential here. Like, when was your light bulb moment?
Yeah, I'll probably say it was that first year at the academy. I was on defense, but I wasn't playing like the edge position. I was playing like our field position. We call it Apache. You're like on the strong side. It's like offside linebacker. But I would get sent on like blitzes like whenever we caught them, and just like the way it felt to just get after the quarterback and to just like go over there and use my physicality and get past anyone that's in front of me. That's something that I wanted to do like often and a lot. So I asked to switch again to like an edge position, and our defensive coordinator, he liked it. He liked the idea. He said we'll try it out, and it's been working out.
Man, shout out to the Army coaching staff. I don't know how many coaching staffs that just listen to players that say they want to switch positions. You obviously had their trust.
Yes, sir, for sure.
Who was like, when you want to make that change, do you go straight to the head coach? Does it start with the position coach? Like, how does that even begin?
Yeah, I mean, I went to my position coach at the time, and then he told me to go talk to the defense coordinator. And then so I talked to the defense coordinator, Coach Woody, and he was all for it. Honestly, he saw what I could do at the other position, and he was all for it.
Cool. So you entered the transfer portal. Take us inside that process from the beginning. Like, how did you start hearing from Georgia, and what was it about Georgia? Like, what did you know about Georgia prior that made you want to explore them to begin with?
Yes, sir. Honestly, just the culture there. Like you hear a lot about culture at other schools. I mean, culture here is amazing, but culture is different everywhere, and that's the one thing that stood out when I initially went over there, and that something that was a big thing that I wanted to be a part of. Like once I entered the portal, um, just being a part of Kirby Smart's, his plan he has for the team. Uh, Guys like Coach Shu and Coach Deribe, like they all have a plan and like a great mind of what's ahead for this team, and that's something I want to be a part of.
When you get on the visit to Georgia, and what goes into a transfer official visit? And I've talked with some other guys about this as well, but I know like the high school visits, and I'm sure it was different at Army, but you see the jersey photo shoots, the schmoozing of high school recruits, those types of things. I know transfer visits are different. Like what all goes into that visit that sold you on Georgia?
Yes, sir. I mean, I feel like, yeah, like exactly what you said. Like, we're not going there to try on jerseys or anything like that or see like the hoops and hollers. I just went in there to kind of like a business, like a business trip, essentially. You go in there and you meet the coaches, meet all the D coordinator, talking to Coach Smart and just talking to everybody, my family, making sure like what they were thinking about it too. Just you're basically getting like the whole grasp of it, like in, essentially like a couple hours. But it was great. We walked in there, we toured the schools, we toured the facility, we saw some it's like workouts they do, and just like meeting time. Got meeting time with the coaches, and it just presented a plan for me. I mean, that's something I wanted to be a part of.
You said the word culture, which when I ask people about Georgia, like I hear the word culture a lot. And to your point, like culture is different everywhere. Like when you talk about Georgia having a good culture, like what does that even mean? Like where does that show up?
Yes, sir. I mean, it's a winning culture for sure. Them when it's all said and done, like Georgia knows how to win. They're a team that's going to go after it. They're a team that's relentless. Their defense is relentless. They're going to go after it. They're going to go after the ball. That's something that's very similar. That I saw a lot of similarities to our defense. How successful we were last year. I saw that in the meetings we're talking about with coaches and just the overall environment. It was special.
You mentioned Glenn Schumann, Deribe, Kirby Smart. Like I think I saw in an article I think it was at 24/7 with Chris Hummer, where you had said that you can feel it. Like when Deribe and Schumann, like they let you know when they really want you, when they really need you, and you can feel it. What did they share with you during the process that really resonated and made you realize, like, all right, Georgia needs a player like me at this exact moment in time?
Yes, sir. Just the whole nature of what's going on in that room, just in terms of graduates and people that are heading to the NFL, just felt like they definitely expressed their like need for someone in that position, and just as far as like they was breaking down my film, and not that they just wanted me, but like they really needed me, and they expressed that. So yes, sir.
Did you even visit anywhere else, or was it all Georgia the whole way?
No, sir. It was Georgia.
Okay. Talk ball to me for a second, because I know that you and all the defensive coaches probably got into all of this when you were on the visit. Like, how do you see yourself fitting into Georgia's defensive scheme? And I guess I hate asking two-parted questions, but I feel like it makes sense here. How does it compare to what you were being asked to do at Army over the last few years as well?
Yes, sir. So essentially it would be like a jack outside linebacker is what they call it over there. We called it a dog, but it's essentially the same position. But yeah, honestly, it would just be blitzing the quarterback. Third downs, first and second down. I can either be in the flat. I can take out a tight end in the back and take out a receiver. I can still be in coverage. They're just essentially being a two-way player in terms of rushing and covering. So for sure.
How does Georgia have a position that's basically the exact same as Army, and y'all call it dog there, and Georgia doesn't call it dog? You'd think they're missing an opportunity there, not calling something dog at Georgia.
Yes, sir. I mean, I hear you. I hear you over here. But yeah, it's been a very successful position last season with Chad Chambliss. He led it last year with I think he had 6.5 sacks as well over there at that position. He's very very productive player. He was in the mix, and I can see myself, providing the same value.
Cool. No, I'm in no position to be questioning Glenn Schumann or Kirby Smart terminology. They've forgotten more football than I'll ever remember in my entire life. So no, just a fun little jab. But I'm curious, when you're watching film, whether it's other college guys or more likely NFL guys, like who do you watch film on or study to try and incorporate things into your game?
Yeah, for sure. I'm a big Micah Parsons guy, for sure. He's somebody that, as terms of like get off and just aggressiveness and just like your will to win, that's somebody that I'm big on. I would say him for sure. He's somebody that I really just watch, all day long. I would say, in terms of college, I would say Abdul Carter. He's just somebody that we saw in the draft. We saw what he did. Just in terms of his get off, I think he has like a really good, like a great get off. Something I've been trying to improve myself on. So yeah, I would say those two for sure.
All right, cool. So you're a Penn State guy, is what you're saying?
Go Dogs.
All right, so I'm sure Duribe made you fully aware of this, but the Nigerian flag flies pretty proudly in Athens these days. And you've got Joseph Jonah Ajanye, Nnamdi Ogboko, Darren Ekenigbon, obviously Coach Duribe as well. I don't think I'm missing anyone. Jordan Hall actually met with the media recently, and he was joking that Joseph Jonah Ajanye always likes to say because he's Nigerian, he's genetically superior to everybody else on the team. I'm curious, what's the magic sauce between Georgia and Nigeria that makes it such a successful formula recently?
Yeah, I mean, I guess just the way it happens. I mean, you can't deny them. Like we're here. I just feel like our work ethic is different. Just the way we think is different. Not to discredit anybody else, obviously, but just different.
For sure. All right, cool. So you've got 2 years of eligibility remaining. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
I don't want to put you on the spot here because a lot of it has to do with how the year goes. But do you have a plan in terms of is this a 1 year trying to get to the league plan? Do you have a 2-year plan? Do you know what that even looks like yet?
Yes, sir. It's for sure something I'm still going after. Trying to get there first. But I'd love to just do whatever plan is gonna set me up for success. I mean.
In retrospect, that was an unfair question. You don't know what your 25 season is going to look like yet. Exactly. We can have that conversation in December.
We'll see. Yes, sir.
Yeah. All right, cool. So I have a few other questions that I didn't really know where to work them in during the course of the interview. So I'm going to just drop them in here. I'm going to start here. How sick is the Army-Navy game?
Oh, man. I mean, it's different. Just in terms of we talk about culture a lot, and we talk about just, the environment of things and just the tenacity of things. It's really a feeling that you just really can't explain. When you're on that field and you just see everyone, you see all the cadets from both teams and the whole NFL stadium packed out. You can't explain it. It's insane.
All right, so you played Notre Dame last year. Georgia played Notre Dame last year. I know both of them didn't really end the way that you would have wanted them to, but that's okay. But I know Georgia fans are still recovering a little bit from the playoff loss, and so I want you to help them cope a little bit. You got to see Notre Dame up close in person. How good was that Notre Dame team, and what made them so difficult to beat? Yeah,
I mean, they're an extremely talented team. Very, very well coached, I would say. They're just disciplined. They come in there professionally, they're not chirping or doing anything extra. They're just coming in there and executing their plays well, executing their blocks well, and they had some good runs in the beginning that we just couldn't get back. And they're extremely well coached team.
You've mentioned the culture similarities, or at Army and Georgia and some things like that. But what would you say is the biggest similarity between Army and Georgia?
Yeah, I would for sure say just the winning mentality. The way that they care about winning. Some other teams can care about other things, but I feel like just the ability to care about how you win and just the way you go about doing it is just, it's nice. It's day and day. It's right there.
What's the biggest difference between the two?
It's going to be obvious. It's going to be SEC. You know, it's just like you're on the big stage now. You know, now it's time to chance that I can just, you know, go show, you know, the world what I can do.
A little sentimental question for you. What are you going to miss most about West Point?
For sure, the people. You know, the people here are amazing. People you meet here, you know, they're just relationships that I chose to take for a lifetime. You know, don't take any of it for granted. But you know, you meet some special people here. You know, some people that you just like shared hardships. You know, you go through kind of like the basic training to get in here. You know, you do all that with the same people that you're graduating with, essentially. So yeah, you just, you know, all the hard things that you do here, it just brings you closer. And so I'll definitely miss those people for sure.
So talking about that, the hard things that go on at Army that make, you know, grow you closer. Like people talk about Georgia practices and how hard they are, how intense they are. I'm sure you've heard a little bit about that, but is there a part of you that's going to be kind of like, guys, it's not that hard. Like I was doing Army training.
Yeah. I mean, I'm sure the correlation will be there. And, maybe not in the ways I think, but in terms of mindset, I mean, I'm ready for sure to just take on anything in front of me.
That's actually a good one to end on. What is the most physically grueling activity or training that you had to do at West Point?
Man, yeah, I'll probably say this past summer we had an event called Cadet Field Training, and it's basically where you're like in the field for like 2 weeks. You know, you're out there, and you know, I don't know why in the summer it always wants to start pouring, raining. You know, you wake up and you're like basically swimming in water, and it's just you're constantly doing things 24 hours, getting like 2 hours of sleep. I mean, you're constantly being graded, constantly being tasked, no sleep, and the food you eat is the MREs. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that, like the little package, it's like a little packaged like thing with it has like food that you'll make with like I don't even know how to explain it, but like that was for sure the challenging part, just getting through all that. But again, like you do it with those people, you're doing it with your teammates, so that all makes it worth it for sure.
For sure, built different. It's easy to see, you know, what Georgia saw in you and why, you know, it's going to make such a good fit. Elo, thank you again for hopping on with us. We'd love to have you on the show again eventually. I don't know how that will work out in terms of when you're getting to Georgia and things like that, but I know everyone's going to be super happy to have heard from you and excited to see you suit up for Georgia this fall as well.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
All right, Jordan. I think when you asked me yesterday, how did it go? I said he's exactly what you would expect an Army transfer to be. How did that description line up?
You nailed it. I thought he was fantastic. I liked you pointing out that the jack position, they don't call it the dog. Why not? You know, if Elo has a good year, either call it the cadet, or I liked their position, the Apache. Like,
Apache. I know. Now I need to know. I should have asked him that. Like, tell me all the sweet names that Army's defense has. You got dog, you got Apache. Like, it sounds like the coolest defense ever.
Yeah, I really enjoyed hearing from him. It was cool to hear his story. And, yeah, I'm sure that he's not going to be, you know, smiling ear to ear when Kirby Smart and those guys are pushing him through practice. But, you know, he's been through quite a bit. I think he's ready for what's going to be thrown his way.
Yeah, he took the humble approach to my question when I said, oh, you know, hey, when he's listening to, you know, whoever it is, Isaiah Gibson or, you know, Chase Linton, these young guys that, you know, oh, man, this is tough. It's like, guys, do cadet training and then get back to me. All right. I think you are going to pull up some highlights for those that are watching on YouTube as well. The thing that shows up to me with him is just, and it shouldn't be that surprising, I guess. I mean, he's a dude from the Army, but he's just got raw strength to him. And I feel like, you know, you typically think like quick, twitchy edge type in terms of what Georgia has done. Like he is more in the Chaz Chambliss mold, I would say, in terms of just physical, tenacious, tough. Like he's going to hit you, that type of thing. Like he is just a really, you know, strong dude. And look, his best football is in front of him. I think that's what is probably the scariest thing for anybody that has to match up against him this year is he already has a lot of great film out there. You know, he has one, we might have already seen it, but it was a third down against Tulane in the conference championship game. And he just absolutely abuses the tackle on his side, forces a 4th and long. They end up going on to win that game because of it, I think. But look, Georgia needed this guy. This was not just a case of he was awesome, like he's a good player, and Georgia's like, oh, we need to go get this good player. This guy fits a very specific mold of something Georgia does not have with experience in college football right now, and or on the roster right now. And so, yeah, I mean, I think it makes perfect sense why Georgia pursued him and why it didn't take him. He didn't need to take anything other than a Georgia visit because there was nowhere else that made sense for either side.
Yeah, I love, if you're a Georgia fan, that had to be music to your ears, that he was just like, no, it's pretty much Georgia. And the thing to me, especially with a transfer from Army coming up to Georgia, I always kind of look at it like some of the college basketball transfers we see where it's like, okay, this guy averaged 18 points per game at Wofford. You go, okay, so how is that going to translate? He's not going to score 18 points in the SEC. You know, how does he adjust to that jump in competition? Loved his get off, but a lot of those, you know, there were several highlights in that clip against Temple, and he just blows right by the left tackle. And all due respect to Temple's left tackle, but he's going to be facing tougher competition. So what does that adjustment look like? How does he handle that? I think he's up for it, but he will have growing pains, and there are ways he will have to improve. Just fascinating to see what it looks like.
The one thing that I think really plays into his favor and Georgia's favor is what Army did up front, like schematically, is very similar to what Georgia does up front. And so I think, you know, there's different terminology and things like that he's going to have to learn when he gets to Georgia. But in terms of what he's going to see when he's up front and, you know, pre-snap, it's going to look a lot like what he was experiencing at Army as well. And so I think that's going to pay dividends for both sides. Thank you, Elo, for coming on to the show as well. He was fantastic, as I would have expected. Couple of final segments before we wrap up the show. We'll get into the usual arrow pointing up and predict to commit here shortly, but I want to also include in these, while we're doing these over the next couple of weeks, where I am on the road, just because I am going to have been on the road as well. And so I'm just going to go through kind of where I've been. We're sitting here on Wednesday. So where all have I been? Monday morning, I was at, and now my week's getting away from me already. I'm already blanking on where I was at 6 a.m. Jordan, where was I at 6 a.m. on Monday morning?
You're asking the wrong person. I've followed along with the different. When were you?
I was at Raven Gap. I went to North Georgia. I was at Raven Gap. That's how you know I'm in a bad place right now, Jordan. That I can't even remember where I was 48 hours ago. Raven Gap. For starters, this is my first time on campus. They're a beautiful school. It's a boarding school up in North Georgia. They actually play in the North Carolina School District. Derek White does a fabulous job of, you know, finding a lot of international talent that comes into play at Raven Gap. But, you know, there's a reason they're a championship team, and I got to see them do some strength and conditioning stuff in the morning, and I can't think of a less fun way to start a day than 6 a.m. mat drills. I was glad that I was able to stand on the side and just kind of laugh and, you know, poke fun at the guys that were having to run over to the trash can and whatever. I was just kind of getting to sit there, be the innocent bystander. But I was really there primarily to see an offensive lineman, and I'm going to try and get this name right. He's from Germany. His older brother, Killian, played for Auburn for several years and is now on the Falcons practice squad. It reads like Zierer, but I'm going to try. I got him to pronounce it to me like 15 different times so that I could try and get it right. It is Wilson Cedar. And if I'm going to send this clip to him and to ask him to tell me how wrong I just got that. But like I said, there is some familiarity there between him and Georgia because Mike Bobo was the offensive coordinator that recruited Killian to Auburn. And so Bobo and Killian only ended up playing for Bobo for 1 year, but they know each other. And that's paid off in terms of Georgia getting involved in this recruitment. You know, what's interesting is, you know, he just moved from Munich 8 months ago. Like, he was living over in Germany while his brother was playing in Auburn all these years. And he's come over to the States to visit Auburn in the past, which definitely gives Auburn some built-in advantages because he's visited Auburn like 8 times and he just hasn't been to all these other places that many times. But I find this really interesting. Every year, Raven Gap does a coaches social where college coaches can go to Raven Gap and meet with players, meet with coaches, those types of things. And Kirby Smart was at that this year, and he met with Wilson while they were at that event. And he was so impressed by just Wilson's demeanor and how he looks. I mean, he's 6'5", 275, 280, maybe needs to put on just a little bit of weight, but he's right in that ballpark of what Georgia looks for from its tackles, and also someone that could probably put on some weight and end up playing guard. Kirby Smart was so impressed by him that like Stacey Searles really picked up recruiting him hard immediately after that. And obviously with Mike Bobo's relationship there, that's helped. Killian actually joined Wilson at the spring game. They went to the spring game together, and Wilson brought his older brother along, which is easy to do now that he's on the Falcons practice squad. And, Wilson said, like, look, my brother's not going to push me to Auburn. My brother's going to be very honest with me about what he's seeing. And when he got to Georgia and just saw the way that they work and the facilities and those types of things, like Georgia very much has his older brother's blessing in terms of, what kind of experience you can have there. He will take his official visit for scavenger hunt weekend in the middle of May. I think it's May 15th to 17th or 16th to 18th, one of those two. And then he will take a handful of other official visits throughout June. Then he's going to go back to Germany, and he'll commit at some point while he's back over in Germany. He has not been back home to Germany since he got over to Raven Gap about 8 months ago. And so he's going to go spend some time with family and then make his decision with them. But really impressed by him. I also got in the afternoon by Woodward Academy to see a guy that Georgia's still taking a look at, Blake Stewart, defensive back. I'm very high on this guy. Super high IQ kid. Smooth football player, plays on both sides of the ball. While I was out there, Indiana was out there taking a look at him, and they love him. He's got official visits scheduled to Miami, Clemson, and SMU. He just added Vanderbilt and Michigan as well. So it's a pretty busy schedule. It's hard for me to envision Georgia getting in there without him having to rearrange things. But I think with him, it's a matter of, does Georgia have other options at safety that it is prioritizing more in this cycle? And if that's the case, he'll probably end up elsewhere, but it's definitely someone that Georgia is continuing to evaluate. And I would expect to see Georgia at a Woodward Academy practice at some point over the next couple of weeks. Tuesday morning, went to see Terrius Favors, Carver, Atlanta. Boise State commit, someone Georgia really likes as a slot receiver. I didn't get to see him do a whole lot because he's still in track season. He's running 10.4 in the 100 and 21.93 in the 200. So he's trying to, win state and track. And, he's got a chance to do that, but he wasn't doing a whole lot on the football field. But someone that I think Georgia could work their way into. But as I've said to our Dogs 24/7 subscribers in the past as well, Vance Spafford's a 5'9" slot receiver type. Terrius Favors is a 5'9" slot receiver type. Georgia's not taken more than one of those in a recruiting cycle for obvious reasons. They will take one of those almost not every cycle, but any cycle where it makes sense to. I think Georgia will take one of those two guys. There's also a guy in the state, Bubba Frazier, that's committed to Notre Dame that I don't think Georgia will be able to circle back around on just because of how Notre Dame has done in that recruitment. But if in the event you see, a month from now, Vance Spafford flips or ends up somewhere else, have no fear. Georgia has really good options elsewhere at the slot position. And then I went to see a couple other big body wide receivers, Aaron Gregory, Devin Carter, Ryan Mosley. I was out to see this morning. I went by Caden Prothrow's school. He's still playing baseball, and they're not even doing spring practices, so I didn't actually see him doing any football stuff. But out of that group that I just mentioned, Ryan Mosley is probably the one that I feel best about on the Georgia side of things. And then Caden Prothrow, I could see it going either way. Like, I think that Todd Hartley's done a great job there. He loves Georgia. He visited for the spring game. He's kind of getting recruited uniquely because he is a tight end, but he really is a big body wide receiver. He even said when he was at G-Day, he's watching Oscar, but he's also watching a lot of like Colby Young as well, just kind of seeing how he would fit in to different parts of the offense. Todd Hartley is the one recruiting him the most, though, and Todd Hartley is telling all these tight ends that they're planning to take 2, and they've already got Lincoln Keys committed. So we'll see, in my last mock class, I had Mark Bowman, Caden Prothrow, and Lincoln Keys all in it. The more I think about it, that's probably a little bit aggressive, like the likelihood of being able to hit on all three of those. Because Lincoln Keys, Georgia takes him early. He's a 3-star guy. He just went to the Under Armour regional near him, and I think he was like 6'6 plus. He had one of the best broad jumps, one of the best shuttles of any guy his size that they've had at that circuit this spring. And so Lincoln Keys is someone that I think is going to generate more and more interest as well. And so Georgia's going to have to do what they need to do to keep him locked in as well. I haven't been there yet, but if you're listening to this, I will have been to Buford to go see some guys like Graham Houston on the offensive line, Tyree Green at defensive back on Wednesday afternoon. So if you're listening to this, go subscribe to Dogs 24/7 because I will have updates from them, but I don't know what those updates are because as I'm saying it right now, I haven't actually been there yet. And I will also call out, stay locked in because I'll be in South Georgia at the end of the week as well. And there's going to be some good stuff, I think, from the end of the week in South Georgia. It's hard to get down there. I feel like it's undercovered down in South Georgia, Valdosta, Thomasville, Colquitt County, Brooks County. Like there's a lot of really great football programs down there. And just the nature of where a lot of media live and where they're situated, I feel like it gets undercovered. And so I'm trying to correct that this week. And I think there'll be some good updates there as well. All right, Jordan, arrow pointing up. I will let you start.
Start with just the NFL draft. I thought it was a fun edition of the draft. I thought the Falcons did really well, which I'm not used to saying. And I wanted to pose this question to you, Ben, because my wife, Shelby, and I, we were talking about this, and it wound up being like a really interesting discussion. Let's say you are a first-round talent going in the draft. Do you go to the draft, or do you do your own thing at home and do that? Which option would you take? And I'll give you my answer.
Well, I think it really depends if I know I'm going to be a first-round pick. Because
let's say you do.
If I know that I'm going to be a first-round pick, like if I'm the Cam Ward or whatever, like I would go to the draft. And the reason why is just because you're never going to have – and I realize the same can sort of be said if you're at home with your family and you get drafted, but you're never going to be able to have an experience like that ever again in your life where you're being drafted and you're the guy and you're talking to the commissioner and you're getting, and I'm not even I'm not even the type of guy that would want to be doing a bunch of media and TV interviews and stuff like that. But, you get some exposure and it's your moment and, you get to go. I know maybe some people, if it was in Green Bay, they're like, I don't know how crazy I am about going to Green Bay this time of year, but you get to go to a cool place that you're not normally going to get to go to unless you're getting drafted by the Packers or if you're getting drafted by whatever it's being hosted. So I would go, but that would only be if I knew I was going to be like a top 15 pick. If I felt like there was any conversation that I was going post 15, you set yourself up for that Jalen Milroe situation where you're there, but you're not getting drafted. And even though you're still getting to enjoy the experience, like Jalen Milroe probably had a blast. But there's still that conversation that's going on where it's like, why do you even bother showing up, whatever. And it's just you become the butt of a joke that you didn't need to be.
The thinking from my wife and from me was you go to the draft. You hit on a big part of it. You'll never get that chance again. You're going to have an experience of a lifetime to go. But two, it was kind of more of the negatives to if you do your own thing because one, we realized that, if you're at your home and you have all those people there, it winds up kind of being like you're planning a wedding in that you have to decide who gets invited and who doesn't. And mom has this second cousin that she really wants there. And, we can't have that many people. But two, the slide is like the biggest negative to go into the draft because they keep cutting to you and, it's really awkward. There's a lot of shots you. But if you do that at home, you're sitting there. And you've got your uncle walking up every few picks, just being like, hey, keep your head up. You're just getting advice from people you do not want to hear from right now. You're just waiting on the phone to ring. I think going to the draft is the way to go.
Yeah. Well, the only alternative that I can think of, I think I saw, and I wish I could credit the right place because I saw it earlier this week, but Lawrence Taylor was asked about his draft night. And he said, I don't remember much. I was 41 Coors Lights deep. And then they said, were you with your family or what were you doing? He was like, no, I was with my drinking buddies. And like, I guess that's a fair alternative if you're just like, you know what, I don't need to do that. Like to your point, I don't need the second cousin or the great aunt or whatever it is to be, forcing their way onto getting some TV time. Like, I just want to kind of hang out and enjoy myself and like do what I would be normally doing on a regular Thursday night or Saturday afternoon or whatever it is. So LT might have had the right idea there if you're not going to go to the draft. But I'm with you. Look, if you got a tight-knit family and it's like you and just a few people, like I can get it. Like you want to be around your people. And look, it's probably more enjoyable to just kick back on a couch and lay, than be sitting and have cameras all around you and sort of in this stressful environment. But yeah, I wouldn't want to deal with the stresses of having to manage family behavior and things like that as well. And, some family member always becomes a meme nowadays. They always do something when you're on the phone or something happens. I mean, I guess there was an offensive lineman that was drafted and he was taking his call and his cat was in the video and he became kind of the star. I guess those are some of the moments where maybe it's worth it for certain guys to be at home because it's like, all right, your cat just became like a national sensation and, that's just like stupid, silly fun. But yeah, you only get drafted one time. Why not go to the draft if you're invited?
Quinn Ewers revealed to everybody that he is actually Craven the Hunter with every animal known to man stuffed in his house. So that was definitely something, and kind of a little bit of an awkward transition, but I guess it works. Arrow pointing up kangaroos. Did you see this in Auburn?
No, I didn't, but I've seen this video sitting down here below, and I've been wondering what the heck you're doing.
So a kangaroo got loose around Auburn, and I feel like this is from James Spann on Twitter. I mean, it stopped traffic on I-85. Could you imagine, you're on your way to work and all the traffic stopped and you're like, well, was there a wreck? No, a kangaroo got loose. And I wanted to say this, kudos to whoever took that video. I would have raced that thing. I would have been in the second lane just seeing how fast this kangaroo. I would have made sure I wouldn't have hit it, if I had to slam on the brakes. But that person had better willpower than me. I would have tried to see how fast that kangaroo could have got hopping.
Knowing my luck, if I tried to do something like that, he would have taken out my driver's window or my windshield or something like that and said, hey, buddy, you're too close. Get out of here.
Like a good neighbor, State Farm is there.
Exactly right. All right, arrow pointing up for me. I'm just going to say a couple Athens things that are arrow pointing up on. One, Twilight was last weekend. Always a great time. I love experiencing Athens when the entire city is just shut down. You can, walk around. For people that are drinking type, you get the open container around Athens, which is a nice little change of pace. Obviously, it's just a different vibe during Twilight weekend. So thoroughly enjoyed being down there. One of the reasons that I was down there as well is my wife and I were celebrating our 4th wedding anniversary last week. And so we actually went, I'm going to give a shout out to a local restaurant that I had never been to before and is awesome. Asterio Olio. So it's an Italian restaurant. It's like this area near-ish to downtown. I don't even know how to describe like the area that it's in, but there's an old rivet factory that got changed into a hotel called the Rivet. And the restaurant is called Asterio Olio. Awesome pasta, awesome pizza. Maybe a little bit more on the pricey side than certain Athens places, but 100% worth it, especially for an anniversary dinner. So I wanted to give a shout out there because it was delicious. They actually have this like family style where you like the chef, you get the family style meal, and then the chef and the waiter like ask you certain questions and they form what your menu will look like based on those types of things, and you get to kind of share it as a table. We didn't actually do that, but I saw that and I was like, man, this is sweet. I'll definitely be back to be doing that. So shout out to Athens for both of those two things. And then I was going to arrow pointing up my vision because I was supposed to be going to get a LASIK consultation immediately after we recorded this. And then they were the ones that had to end up rescheduling it. So now I don't know when I'm going to get my LASIK consultation. And for all I know, I'm going to be wearing glasses for the rest of my life. So arrow no longer pointing up on my vision.
Didn't see that coming, did you?
Oh, Jordan. Oh, gosh, you're sick. Okay. All right. Last thing we'll do, predict a commit. Let me pull up, which I had pulled up responsibly until we actually got to the segment where I needed it. we're going to do predict to commit. I'm going to run through who Jordan has selected, who I have selected. And what I'll do is I'll read through who I've selected, and then I'll make my pick, and then I'll read through who you've selected, and then you can make your pick. So I have taken offensive lineman Graham Houston, defensive back Zach Fort. Always got to remind Jordan that I do have a check mark next to someone already. Running back Jay Lamar. Offensive lineman Malcolm Gaston, who I've already talked about. You know, Jordan, if you really want to take one to me, Desmond Green's an option that's out there potentially. I'm not saying to do it right now, but just food for thought. Defensive back Tyreek Green. Offensive lineman Jackson Cantwell. Wide receiver Ryan Mosley. Offensive lineman Ekene Boko. Offensive lineman Brett Colajay. And defensive lineman Ernest Rankins. I'm going to stick at defensive back. It's a guy that was previously committed to South Carolina that Georgia has liked for a long time now. I don't think that Georgia is a lock to get him, but I think that Georgia was the primary reason why he decommitted from South Carolina, and that is Duluth defensive back Peyton Dyer. This is a guy I actually saw for the first time about a year and a half ago now, really when Georgia started to recruit Demola Ajitahan out of Duluth, and I got up to Duluth High School, and all their coaches, their recruiting staff guys, right when I got there, they were like, you got to see this Peyton Dyer kid. Like, he's got an offer from Liberty right now. He's going to blow up. And sure enough, they were dead on. This dude is completely blown up. You know, you look at his body type, he is what an SEC defensive back looks like. Like, he is toned up. He looks the part. You know, he's long. Everything that Georgia looks for from its defensive backs, Peyton Dyer has. You know, if we're just, you know, being hypercritical here, if you're looking for, you know, he's not, maybe doesn't have the blow you away 4.3 type of speed at corner that sometimes you're looking for. But look, Georgia just had so much success with Kamari Lassiter that I think if you have a certain body type, you have certain coverage skills, you have a certain mental makeup, as long as you hit a certain threshold, like you're in that high 4.4, low 4.5 range, like that's more than enough for Georgia. This is not a done recruitment. You know, Southern Cal, Ohio State. I'm assuming some others are probably going to get in and see him this spring and probably try and make a push to get a summer official visit scheduled. That said, I like where Georgia stands right now. And because I do think Georgia was the driving reason behind his decision to decommit from South Carolina, I'm going with Peyton Dyer.
Really like that pick. That's one where I kind of try to keep notes and try to keep in mind guys to consider, and that was a total miss. We're talking to our scouts. He should have been on our board. I really like that pick of Peyton Dyer.
Well, that's okay, because I think I've told you already, I'm supposed to be the recruiting guy, allegedly, right? And there have been multiple picks that you've made during the course of this predicted commit year where, you know, I think of Jordan Smith, I think of Kamari Brooks, like a couple guys that I did not have on my board at the time. Like I usually have one or two guys that I'm going to select from, and I didn't have them either of the days that you picked them, and I regret that deeply.
So we gotta keep it competitive.
All right, so for you, we've got running back Derek Cooper, linebacker Tyler Atkinson, defensive lineman Carter Lucky, tight end Mark Bowman, defensive back Jordan Smith, offensive lineman Jared Smith, edge rusher, outside linebacker, Kamari Brooks, quarterback, Jared Curtis, defensive lineman now. You drafted him as an offensive lineman. I'll just put that out there. But defensive lineman, PJ Dean, and wide receiver, Craig Dandridge. I will say before you make your pick, since we have been recording this show, Jordan, I have gotten a text message from someone that I trust that says that someone on your team, they are told, is heavily leaning towards Georgia. So I will give you that right now. I'm not going to say who it was, but I will say there is somebody on the team that I got a text during this recording about a player that I think you will eventually get a check mark next to their name.
We're not going to go 0 for it, and that was the whole plan. Just get one on the board. That's all we needed. We're going for another one here, and we're going to go down to the state of Florida, and we're getting James Johnson, defensive lineman from Miami. You did a great job in your mock class just kind of talking about James Johnson and explain that, you know, this sits with you as the kind of defensive lineman Georgia wants to go and get, a recruitment they want to go win, 6'2.5", 285 pounds. Going to be very competitive. We know how hard it is to pull guys out of Miami. I like Georgia's ability to go in and, you know, show a guy like James Johnson, a guy like Jalen Carter that they got out of the state of Florida, out of Apopka, 4-star, number 10 defensive lineman in the country. I don't know how soon a guy like James Johnson is going to make a decision, but to me, he checks the boxes of what Georgia wants in a defensive lineman. Won't come easy, but I got James Johnson as my predicted commit.
I like the pick a lot. Like, he was in my mock class. I've considered it at times. Like, my fear, you brought up what my fear has been around that one is, he's from Florida at a time when it feels like Florida is on the upswing in terms of roster building. It feels like Miami is on the upswing in terms of roster building, and Florida State's probably about as desperate as they've ever been. And so you're recruiting a kid from Florida at a time when it's really hard to get a guy out of Florida that the Florida schools really want. That said, you mentioned it, Jalen Carter, Jordan Hall. I mean, you can even go away from the defensive line and go like Raylan Wilson. Like, there are people from Florida that you would traditionally say, how's state of Florida is not going to let this guy get out of the state, yet Georgia tends to find a way. So I do like that pick, bold pick, just because he is a very highly rated defensive lineman. He's someone that I think, talk about a guy arrow pointing up. I think arrow pointing up on James Johnson. And so, because of that, does it become increasingly harder throughout the year to be able to land him? Yes. But I think at this exact moment that you're picking him, I think Georgia's the right choice. So I think that that's a great selection by you.
Appreciate that. And it feels like these last few years, especially like with Florida, it seems like Georgia and Florida go back and forth on defensive line commits, and Georgia trying to flip guys, and Florida winning some and Georgia winning some. So it'll be a fun one to follow.
No doubt. All right. Well, I don't know exactly look, here's the deal. If Jared Curtis commits to Georgia on Monday, we're going to be doing a breaking news podcast of sorts. So depending on how that goes, you might not have to wait long to have a recruiting episode. It won't necessarily be this like full extensive interview type of Stay Wolk UGA recruiting show, but we will likely have some type of recruiting content, even if it's not a breaking news episode on Monday, at least something next week talking about the Jared Curtis. If Jared Curtis commits to Georgia, we will have a breaking news episode. If he doesn't commit to Georgia, we might just talk about it later in the week in the typical episode, but I'm sure at the very least within 2 weeks we will, be back. And, I'm looking at the calendar now. Jackson Canwell commits on May 13th. So May 14th maybe is the smart next date for one, but I don't know. I'm currently doing programming meeting with Jordan in the middle of an episode. So hand up on that one. We'll play that by ear. I really enjoyed this episode. Again, I've said it already, but Elo Modozie was awesome, and I think that Georgia fans should be super excited about him. I will give one final Dawg 24/7 subscription tease. Definitely check out our site. Jordan, Kip Adams, Olivia, and I'm proud of the work that we're doing. And this time of year, I think is one of the best to be able to jump in, because look, if you get your annual subscription, now you get everything. You get the start of recruiting, you get all the way into football season, you get all the way through basketball season. It's like you kind of just check everything off right away. So I think now's the time to hop in. But until next time, I'm your host, Benjamin Wolk, here with Jordan Hill, and we will see you guys maybe for a breaking news episode next week, but also for the next Stay Wolk UGA recruiting episode in a couple weeks as well.